Republican state senator and now candidate for
Yes.
Texas Attorney General Joan Huffman of Houston. Thank you so much and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You bet. So why are you running for Attorney General and what is the essence of your campaign?
Well, I'm running because, with my unique background, I think I'd make a great Attorney General, honestly. I have been a prosecutor for many years, was a criminal district court judge after that, and then I've been in the state senate since 2008, chairing a lot of the really big committees where a lot of the big pieces of conservative legislation passed through. State affairs for many years, jurisprudence. I chaired the redistricting when we redrew the maps in 2021. And then I've been chair of the Finance Committee for the last 4 years. And so that just gives me some really unique qualifications to run for AG. And as I look at the AG, Paxton's done a good job in many respects, kind of fighting against federal overreach, defending our liberties. But I would like to see the office really use every tool, every resource to implement all the laws available to keep Texans safe. I really like to develop the law enforcement side of the office. Just, when you look around our state, you look at the transnational crimes, interstate crimes, whether it's, human trafficking, fentanyl trafficking, a lot of scams on the vulnerable, like veterans and the elderly, Medicaid fraud. And I think that part of the office is not being developed and used in the way that it should. And I would really focus on that. Of course, as I said, doing the important functions of the office, like, child support division, all the kind of the things, the job that the AG has to do. But I think there's other things we can do to really enhance the office.
And I'm curious about that. So what do you have in mind as far as building up the level of enforcement when it comes to those things, transnational crimes, Medicaid enforcement?
Right. Well, there are already a couple of hundred, if not 250, so law enforcement officers that actually work for the Attorney General's office. They have their own association. They are true law enforcement officers. I would assign lawyers to them so that they could work with local prosecutors. Over the years, there's kind of been a distrust that has developed between prosecutors, local law enforcement, and the AG's office. Kind of I don't want to call it a turf war, but almost that, right? But I think there's a way to regain that trust. I think with my background as a prosecutor, all the work I've done with law enforcement for decades, actually, with the judiciary, just working with those types of groups, that I think we could start working on developing that trust so that if locals needed help, for example, there's lots of crimes that happen from county to county, whether it's fentanyl trafficking, as I said, or human trafficking. And I think if the locals felt like, well, hey, we can reach out to the AG's office, they're going to step in, they've got resources, and they are committed to helping us. They don't want to take over our case, but they want to help us. Then maybe there would be that bond that we could develop, and ultimately that would really benefit Texans.
How so, do you think?
Well, I just think that there's a gap there now. I think we see, a capital murder can happen in rural Texas. I mean, crime has now, you find it all over the state. I was in Midland, Odessa yesterday, and I was surprised that they had some local forum and some of the local candidates were talking, and they were talking about a crime problem. You think of our big cities here in Dallas or me back in Houston, and we think, well, we have really the crime, Texas is safe, but they see it everywhere. So all Texans care about being safe, no matter where they live. And all the local law enforcement and prosecutors, want to do the best job they can. And I think that working with an AG's office that was supportive would be a benefit for them. And I think if they saw that, they would want to do that.
You talked a little bit before about what you bring to the table, and I'm wondering, as for the Republican primary voter out there, why do you think they should vote for you over the other Republicans in the primary?
I'll go back to my experience and my qualifications. And, I've been in the Senate a long time. They can look at my record. I have a very conservative voting record. I am a conservative. My focus has been on law and order, fiscal matters, always been very supportive, as said, it shepherded many of the big pieces of legislation through. I wrote the first voter ID bill. We care very much as Republicans, and all Texans care about election integrity. I wrote the first voter ID bill that stood up in court. As chair of state affairs, I shepherded all of the big Second Amendment bills through state affairs. The campus carry, open carry, and later, of course, and I was not the chair anymore, but we passed constitutional carry. And I helped bring law enforcement and help with the legal issues that sort of brought that across the finish line, because there was some pushback in the state, but now we've seen it has done nothing to hurt any Texan that I can see, and it just has enforced our constitutional rights. But it was that kind of background and experience that I have that was able to push in the conservative issues and legislation that is very important to the Republican primary voter.
You spoke before about some of your priorities if you are to be elected, as far as going back and building up some of the elements of the office. Do you have any other priorities if you were elected?
My priorities are going to be to keep Texans safe, and that's what I will focus on. Also to defend their liberties. I mean, kind of depending on what's going on at the federal level, I think we have to defend our rights, and some of these corporations who overstep, who try to pass ideology onto Texans that they don't want, I'll always fight against that. My also really big objective is to secure, what can I do to help secure the border? Of course, right now the border's in a different condition than it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago. But we still are playing a huge role down there, and it's a role that I've been participating in as finance chair, because I've really, the money has driven our policy at the border, and we've been, as a state, very aggressive in helping the feds, or when the feds wouldn't do their job, doing it ourselves, and we have done that for, we've spent billions of dollars on that in the last 2 years and 4 years. Again, now that Trump is our president, we've seen it's a different situation down there, but there are still a lot of human trafficking, a lot of drug trafficking, and the state is still playing a huge role down there in assisting ICE and assisting the federal government with their priorities down there. And we see that with Governor Abbott getting involved, Governor Abbott now sending the National Guard to other states. So clearly Texas is still playing a huge role in the border enforcement, but also just crime enforcement or law enforcement. It's not really law enforcement, but trying to help with crime in even in other parts of the country at this part.
And if you're elected, you're still going to put a huge emphasis on that.
Yes.
The border.
Yeah, I think the border being secure is very important. It in a lot of ways. It's just the security that a lot of folks feel with it. Hopefully it'll cut down on some crime. A lot of people argue that there's more economic opportunities for other Texans if there's less undocumented individuals crossing our border. And my concern for many years has been the unaccompanied minors that have been crossing the border. There are tens of thousands of young children that have crossed the border. Many of them are unaccounted for to this day. And I have been very concerned about that for a long time, as have others. But the bills that I've passed through human trafficking, we've tried to, keep better watch over these kids, but it's hard. And that was something I would focus on, that, try to make sure that the children crossing the border, if there are still some that are unaccompanied, would be accounted for. Yeah.
And so I know normally that's a federal role, but
yes.
What do you see the potential role for the state playing in that, with that regard?
Well, a lot of the kids, for example, that cross the border go into facilities at least for some time in the state. I think the Department of State Health Services, which is a state agency, should have a role in making sure that those kids have adequate medical care. They also are supposed to, under federal law, supposed to have schooling, and just making sure that we know exactly who's there, what the kids are doing, and then where they go, and have some follow-up. There is a little tension there between the feds and the state, right, on these issues, but I would really push making sure that we knew what was happening in facilities on, in Texas with children, even because some of them stay there a while. They don't necessarily just pass through. So I would use every resource, again, every law, and any power that I had to make sure that those kids were not being trafficked.
We have seen a lot of shootings lately, deadly shootings, very high profile. The assassination of Charlie Kirk, the
Yes.
attempted assassination of President Trump, the assassination of a Minnesota state senator and her husband. We've had church shootings, we've had school shootings, Uvalde obviously. And so I'm wondering, how can Texas prevent them?
Well, that's a big question. I think what we do is, we just have the best security that we have for events. We continue to try to have big law enforcement presence when we can at events. But, you're asking me how do we fix society almost, and I think there's something sick in society that's causing this, whether it's, too much social media, too much gaming, too much isolation by individuals. Certainly mental health is an issue when we look at these people who commit these horrendous, unspeakable crimes. We have invested a lot of money in mental health in Texas, and we are putting billions into mental health, and that has really increased in the last decade. We've done things to try to bring mental health treatment to young people where before it was harder to get to through sort of this a system that gives access to the Children's Consortium of Mental Health, which gives telemedicine access and stuff to children. But these are the things that the state can do. But as a society, I think we have to, take a really close look at the people who are committing these crimes and try to figure out, what is causing this. It looks like evil to me, but I don't know how we get past that other than pray at this point.
Is Texas doing enough to keep guns out of the wrong people's hands?
Well, I don't think it's the guns that are committing these offenses. I think that we have passed a lot of Second Amendment bills in this state, and I think I mentioned them.
Yeah.
Open carry, campus carry, constitutional carry. That's not what's causing these crimes. You look at these crimes, these folks many of them have gotten legal access to guns. Some have gotten through parents who perhaps were not careful enough with locking up the guns and preventing younger individuals from getting the guns. So I don't think it's the guns that are the problem. I think there is something wrong with the people who are pulling the trigger is the problem. It's not the gun.
And how do you see, if you were elected, obviously President Trump is in office and he'd still be in office if he were elected, but the president could change. There could be a Democrat
Yes.
Elected in 2028. How do you see your job changing depending on who is in the White House?
Well, I think it is true. If we look at our past history, that when Obama was president, President Biden, the state was more involved with filing suits against the federal government and so forth because of policies that we felt were hurting Texans. And if I felt there was a president who was, implementing policies that was bad for Texas, then I would sue him as well. President Trump seems to look at Texas in a more favorable light, clearly, than some of the previous presidents have. And so, we don't see at this point Paxton filing the suits at the same rate. But the truth is, even no matter who the president is, that certainly there can be federal overreach. The federal government clearly is a huge bureaucracy with many, many agencies that sometimes step on Texans' toes. And no matter who's the president, if things can happen that still Texans need to be protected from. That would be my job.
So you would push back?
I would push back. Yes.
And do you envision a scenario, I know it was Governor Abbott who joked while he was Attorney General that he would get up in the morning, he would go to work, sue the Obama administration, and then go home. Is that something you would envision for yourself if there is a Democrat in the White House?
My job would be to protect Texans. I mean, I want to keep Texans free. I want to keep them safe. I want to keep Texas strong. And I would view the office, what my job was that morning through that lens, not with today I'm going to sue somebody. It would be, what do I need to do to take care of Texans today?
And there's been a lot of, in this past week, there's been a lot of controversy over Governor Abbott's decision to send the Texas National Guard to Chicago. It's made national headlines, as you know. Where are you on that? I mean, do you support the governor's decision?
Well, I think what's happening in some of these cities and this lawlessness and what people, who live in those cities have to deal with is awful. I don't think we would ever let one of our cities get that bad in Texas. And to the extent that Governor Abbott has the authority and the power to do that, then I support Governor Abbott in his decisions of how he wants to assist at a national level. And
it's not something that you would raise a question about or anything like that, and you don't now.
And I respect the governor's authority to act, yes.
And how do you see this primary shaping up?
Well, as I've said, I think I'm the most qualified. I'm actually the only former prosecutor, judge, and very senior state senator with my years of experience to ever run for AG. And clearly I'd be the first woman AG if I was elected, which I think would be a good thing for Texas. And I think it's going to be a hard-fought race all the way down the line. I have going to work really hard. I'm going to travel the state. I'm going to try to get my message out what I want to do for Texans, and I think we'll see in a few months how Texans respond to that message. But I plan to work very hard at it.
And my last question is just to ask you if there's anything that I did not ask you about that you would like to say.
No, I don't think so. Like I said, I'm a hard worker. I've got a great background. My heart's in the right place. I'll proceed with integrity, and I think Texans would be well served by Attorney General Joan Huffman.
Republican candidate for Texas Attorney General Joan Huffman and State Senator, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.